Leveticus asks what they do next, after learning to harness the power and teaching the others to fight the tyrants. Zoraida says that she doesn't know, but they can start by learning to manifest the power and become something greater. Leveticus then asks what's in it for her, as she's always plotting something, and Zoraida replies, yes, always something. What's up everybody, Jeff here, and we're back for some more Malifaux lore. This week we're talking about somebody who a lot of you have requested. We're talking about Leveticus of the Outcasts. So spoilers coming up for all of Leveticus' stories, and there's a list in the description below, so you can check those stories out for yourself. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel, and without further ado, let's get into Leveticus. Leveticus and his companion Alice are on their way to a fancy gala for a job. On the way, they stop at a boutique to pick up clothes, and Alice suddenly gets irritated and begins beating down one of the doors. She fires her gun several times, and then explains to the clerks that the buzzing of their radio was driving her mad. She asks them if they have a bag that goes with her shoes, and then casually picks one up, as Leveticus tells her that they have to go. As they make their way to the gala, Leveticus reminds Alice that they don't want to have any collateral damage, and that she needs to make sure she doesn't shoot their target in the head. Alice confirms, and then Leveticus tells her that she needs to be on her best behavior so they don't draw any attention to themselves. When they arrive, they are announced under the fake name of a powerful industrialist and his daughter. Alice smiles and nudges Leveticus, asking, "Daughter, is it?" They make their way inside, among the rich and powerful of Malifaux and Earth. They see the Governor General, as well as Ramos of the Miners and Steamfitters Union. Ramos makes a passionate speech about workers' rights and the safety that should be guaranteed to all the people of Malifaux. When he finishes, the crowd applauds, and Alice breaks away from Leveticus and approaches Dr. Ramos. She asks him to dance, and not wanting to be rude, he politely accepts. As they dance, Alice's mechanical hand begins moving without her control, making its way up Ramos's arm towards his neck. Ramos has to swat her away and becomes curious about the nature of her augments. Leveticus watches on, seething, and looks for an opportunity to cut in. When the song ends, Alice takes Ramos by his lapels, pulling him toward her and then kissing him. The crowd gasps, wondering who this woman is kissing Ramos, and Leveticus' anger overflows. He makes his way towards them, but bumps into a patron and misplaces his cane, causing him to fall to the floor. At that moment, the assassin strikes, firing a rocket down from up above. No one in the crowd hears the whining of the projectile, except for Alice, who draws her pistol and fires at it. The crowd panics from the gunshots, and the missile explodes in the air, raining needles down on the crowd. The needles were coated in poison, but most people in attendance were already inoculated against it, and so it had little effect. Ramos helps Leveticus up, and the two dive for cover, as more rockets rain down, and Alice continues firing. Leveticus reminds Alice not to shoot the assassin in the head, and she continues to fire up at him. The assassin ignites a rocket on his back, taking off into the air, and Alice quickly reloads and fires at him. She hits the rocket, causing the man to crash land outside the building. She makes her way outside to the wreck, and the man attacks her with a sword, but she parries with her metal hand, and snaps the blade in two. She tears at the man's throat with her claws, and by the time Ramos and Leveticus catch up, there's not much left of the man, except for his head. Leveticus picks up the head, and comments that at least Alice followed one of his instructions tonight. Ramos tells Leveticus to do his work, and that they will meet as they had planned. Later, Leveticus welcomes Ramos into his workshop, where the assassin's head is up on a spike and connected to wires and machines. He tells the doctor that he did some preliminary interrogation and was able to confirm that the assassin was working for the Governor General. Ramos asks where Alice is, and Leveticus tells him that she's on an errand and asks why he wants to know. Ramos tells him that that woman is the devil and that he should watch out. Leveticus flips on the machine, and Ramos asks the head what the Governor General hoped to achieve by killing him. The head responds that the Governor General was trying to gain control of the Miners and Steamfitters Union. Ramos tells him that if he died, the union would just elect a new representative, and the head counters that Ramos's second in command is a guild agent. Leveticus turns off the machine, and Ramos asks him if he wants the contract to take out his second in command. After the two discuss business, Ramos leaves, and an image of him kissing Alice flashes in Leveticus' mind. Many of the people who come to Malifaux are brought over as convict labor or indentured servants. Few come for their own purposes, such as Leveticus. Malifaux provides him the privacy he needs, as he's engaged in many things that a more civilized society would find distasteful. His skill at mixing flesh and machine is almost unmatched, and he's even augmented his own body in his laboratory. He's almost always accompanied by his companion Alice, who also has her own augmentations. Together, they operate captivating salvage and logistics, and provide many legitimate services, but also participate in more illicit business behind closed doors. Many people disapprove of Leveticus and Alice's relationship, and rumors spread about inappropriate behavior between them, but these rumors don't seem to affect the success of their business. On the train to Malifaux, Leveticus and Alice meet a strange woman named Victoria, who holds a mysterious sword. Leveticus tells her about the power of soulstones and how crossing the breach changes people. He goes into detail about the guild and the dangers of Malifaux, and Victoria replies that this won't be the first city that she's stayed in that's full of thieves and murderers. As Leveticus goes on, he notices that Victoria is no longer paying attention as they're approaching the breach. When they cross through the portal, Victoria has a particularly strong reaction, but maintains her composure. At Malifaux Station, they disembark from the train, and Leveticus gives Victoria a business card and tells her to call on him if she needs his services. They see Rasputina on the platform and smile at her, and when Victoria walks away, Alice nudges Leveticus in the ribs, and he tells her yes, he did see the sword. He tells Alice to follow the woman, as he is going to see Sonia Crid. Leveticus goes to the Guild Enclave and enters Sonia Crid's office. She tells him that he's late, and he responds that he doesn't like to take a carriage because he likes to walk the city at night. Sonia asks him about the woman and the sword, and Leveticus confirms that she arrived in Malifaux just as Sonia's sources had told her. He also confirms that she's carrying an oriental sword that matches the description that the sources indicated, and he believes it's the Masamune. He adds that Alice is following the woman now. Sonia tells him that he better make sure she doesn't lose her sword, and Leveticus replies that Alice is very capable. Leveticus asks her what her interest is in the sword, and Sonia leads him to a locked room where she pulls out fancy-looking scrolls that have Japanese writing on them. She tells Leveticus that the Ortegas found these in the possession of gremlins in the bayou, and Leveticus is surprised, mentioning that the gremlins are barely sentient, and he can't imagine what interest they would have in them. Sonia tells him that's why she's so curious, and she explains that they tell a story of a man who got his hands on a Masamune sword and used it to fight off demons that were infesting his province. The images on the scrolls show the wielder of the sword slashing at his possessed enemies and cutting the demons inside in half, while leaving their hosts unharmed. Leveticus asks Sonia if she believes the sword in Victoria's possession is the same one from the story. The woman says yes, and adds that she believes these scrolls were brought here when the first breach opened, and that some of the native inhabitants of Malifaux must have gotten their hands on them, learned to understand them, and then reached out to Victoria and summoned her here. Leveticus considers what she's saying for a moment, wondering if a Masamune sword could be found so easily, and then asks Sonia why she didn't tell him all of this before he sent Alice after the girl. Sonia responds that he did say she was very capable. Leveticus stands under the hanging tree, looking out at Malifaux City, deep in thought. Alice stands behind him, looking at the Governor General's mansion, thinking about how to rob it. Leveticus turns to her and asks if she senses what he does. Alice asks if he's talking about her boredom, as he's kept her out here all night to stare at buildings. Leveticus scolds her for being insubordinate, though it was secretly a characteristic he liked about her, and then explains that he was referring to the fact that death is all around them. Alice responds that of course death is all around them, as they're standing in a graveyard. Leveticus wonders why Alice can't sense the veil of death pressing on her, the way that he can. The woman asks why his cane is glowing, and Leveticus holds it up and tells her that it usually does that right before he dies. Still standing under the hanging tree, Alice asks Leveticus what he's going to do since he doesn't have any of his hollow girls around, and warns him that he shouldn't even think about using her to come back to life. He says of course he wouldn't, and her spirit is too strong to be pushed aside by his anyway. Alice starts to sense the same sense of dread that Leveticus was feeling, and she asks if they should run. Leveticus responds that they can't run from this. They hear a mysterious voice speaking an unknown language, and they turn to see the Pale Rider. It speaks again, and Alice asks Leveticus if he understands. He says no, but then another voice from behind them explains that it said, "You are the key." They turn to see one of Leveticus's hollow waifs. Alice is surprised to see her there, and turns back to the rider as another figure approaches, the Dead Rider. It accidentally triggers a trap that Alice had set, and a huge branch swings towards it, hitting it in the chest with enough force to break bones. The rider doesn't seem to notice. The Pale Rider continues talking, and the waif translates, saying that the red cage has fallen. It has torn a hole between this world and the next. It was foretold. The end has come. You are the key. Alice starts to assess the situation to try to plan an escape, but doesn't realize that the Hooded Rider is standing right behind her. Leveticus asks what his role in all of this is, and the Hooded Rider tells him that he will direct them, but first he must die. The Hooded Rider makes one slash with his sword, and Leveticus is almost cut in half, as he says, "I hate this part," and Alice opens fire. Leveticus finds himself between worlds, the pull of the next world tempting him, but only he has mastered the ability to resist and return to the world of the living. He sees the soul of the hollow waif stretched and pulled into the ether, and uses it to tether himself as he begins the process of slowly pulling himself back into the living world. It would only take seconds in the real world, but for him, it will take a long and painful time. He sees the Hooded Rider swing its sword again in slow motion, and knows that it shouldn't have any effect on him in the ether, but somehow the sword cuts the tether, leaving him stranded. He sees the Pale Rider get closer to him and speak, and the waif translates, "They must be punished. They have brought imbalance." Leveticus asks how, as he is stuck, and it responds to go to the one who commands life. Leveticus suddenly feels his spirits pulled through the ether and quickly travel to the bayou near the hut of the swamp hag. He looks around for Zoraida, trying to get used to sensing his surroundings without a physical body. He sees a young woman, clearly not Zoraida, and notices that she's almost naked. He says that even in death he has time to admire a beauty like this, thinking that he can't be heard. To his surprise, the woman looks at him and says, "You haven't changed a bit, old man." He asks who she is, and she laughs, as Leveticus realizes that this is Zoraida. She tells him that the hooded rider told her he would come. Leveticus asks why this is happening, and Zoraida smiles, remarking that it is now Leveticus who comes to her for answers. She adds that she's surprised he doesn't recognize her, since this is how he should remember her, from when he found her long ago. He says he doesn't remember, and Zoraida tells him that he's lying, going on to explain that she believes she is meant to teach him what she has learned, though she doesn't understand what his role is yet. Leveticus says that the riders told him he would lead them to punish those responsible for the imbalance. Zoraida says maybe that's the case, but she doesn't think they can stop them willingly. She adds that it's funny that they all still believe in free will, since their every action is controlled by fate. Leveticus asks what she's supposed to teach him, as the riders approach from out of the swamp. Zoraida says she doesn't know what she's meant to teach, but she intends to learn how to stop a tyrant. Leveticus says that he didn't think that was possible, as she had tried to do it with the girl with the sword and December, but it seems to have only pissed him off. Zoraida clarifies that she wants to stop them, but she no longer thinks that they can be killed in the way that they think of death. She points out that they are a lot like him. Leveticus gets defensive and asks how she means, and Zoraida explains that they are not physical entities, just like Leveticus, though they can take physical form. They draw power from the ether and from people, just like people do with soulstones. She wonders if what happened to this world was that the tyrants devoured it spirit by spirit. As the realization dawns on her, she tells Leveticus that, like humans, they feed off of the power without regard for their actions. She explains that the ether is the greatest source of power, and the tyrants mean to use it to ascend. But they can learn to use it as well, just like they harness the power of soulstones. They might even learn to leech the power from the tyrants themselves. Leveticus asks if she thinks they can really do that, and Zoraida motions to her new body. He then asks why she made herself young, and she explains that she needed to revert to a time when she had different mastery over the fates. She didn't explicitly intend to get younger. He asks what they do next, after learning to harness the power and teaching the others to fight the tyrants. Zoraida says that she doesn't know, but they can start by learning to manifest the power and become something greater. Leveticus then asks what's in it for her, as she's always plotting something, and Zoraida replies, yes, always something. After the event happened, infusing all of the magic users of Malifaux with powerful new abilities, Leveticus and Zoraida spend their time sparring to sharpen their abilities for an eventual battle against the tyrants. Zoraida sits down to take a break, commenting that she may be young now, but her endurance is not infinite. Leveticus is about to respond, but he feels a pain in his head, and he knows that a vision is coming to him, as it has already twice before. He sees himself mounted on a steed, with 4 other riders behind him. They're under attack, and explosions go off around him, as the riders spread out, and they get close to their enemy's line. He can't see who the enemy is, and as they close in, the vision fades, and he's standing before Zoraida again. He tells her everything he saw in the vision, and Zoraida's only response is, "Where was I?" Alice and Leveticus are playing chess, and he takes her bishop and calls check. Alice curses, and Leveticus tells her that she's too focused on her strategy and needs to be able to adapt to her opponent's moves. With every move, it becomes an entirely different game with an entirely different board. Alice thinks for a minute, and then smiles and pulls out her revolver, firing into the table. She exclaims, "An entirely different game with an entirely different board," and it looks like she's won. Before Leveticus can react, there's a knock at the door, and he yells out that Captivating Salvage and Logistics is closed for the night. There's another knock, and Leveticus grudgingly gets up and answers the door. He finds a woman standing there, who has a hole in her chest, and she asks him to excuse the hour, but she has business to address with him. He invites her inside, and Alice approaches excitedly, and asks if she can put her arm through the hole. Leveticus ignores her, and offers the woman a seat, but she doesn't react to either of them. The woman tells him that she needs a guild rifleman by the name of Hawkins found. Leveticus asks if she has anything of the man's, and she hands him a piece of cloth, saying that the man has a piece of obsidian that she needs retrieved. Leveticus knows better than to ask questions, and inquires about payment, and the woman pulls out a bag full of high-quality soulstones. He confirms that he can help, and the woman tells him that she needs the obsidian by tomorrow night, and she doesn't care what comes of the man afterwards. Leveticus asks for her name, and she introduces herself as Tara, and adds that if he can't get the job done, she has a backup plan. Tara turns to leave, and Leveticus takes the piece of cloth and puts it in an acid solution, as Alice returns with a guild hunter. Leveticus pours the solution in a receptacle in the hunter's head, and Alice excitedly yells the hunt begins. They follow the hunter into the Badlands, where they come across a camp outside of a cave entrance. There's a scream, and zombies start pouring out of the cave. The hunter fires at them, and Leveticus uses his power to crumble one of them into dust. A man emerges from one of the tents and yells to Leveticus that Oblivion has spoken to him, and that his power belongs to him. Alice fires at the man, who flinches at the shots, but doesn't fall. His arm suddenly turns into a claw, covered in obsidian scales, and he takes a swipe at Alice, but she dodges out of the way. Leveticus tries to use his magic on the man, but the obsidian scales seem to deflect his power. As more zombies emerge from the cave, he suddenly hears a battle cry as two swordswomen join the fray. Leveticus recognizes the Victorias, and he calls out to them to cut the man's arm off, and he'll finish him, and they can split the bounty. They call back in unison, 60-40, and Leveticus winces but agrees. The hunter tries to pounce on the man, but he lifts up his clawed arm, and the hunter simply disappears. After the Vics fight their way through more zombies, one of them charges at the man and slashes at his arm, cutting it off. Leveticus takes the opening, focusing on the man, and his body crumbles to dust. The only thing left behind is a small piece of obsidian. Victoria picks it up and puts it in her pouch, and turns back to the zombies. Leveticus turns to leave, knowing that he'll get his share of the bounty, as mercenaries take pride in their reputation. Alice joins him and says he doesn't know how the Vics do it, and Leveticus responds that swordsmanship like that takes a lot of training. Alice corrects him that she was talking about their outfits, as they're barely covered and they don't have much protection. She adds that she saw him looking at them, and Leveticus starts to laugh, but when he sees the look on her face, he stops. Leveticus's mastery of necromancy has led him to discover a way to cheat death itself. As long as one of his hollow waifs is nearby, Leveticus can return from death, but not without great cost. He remembers every one of the deaths, and it slowly erodes the edges of his mind. His companion Alice is a lifeline of his, as she helps to ground him after he returns from the ether. According to Zoraida, Leveticus is at the center of the fate of Malifaux, and though she doesn't know what his role will be, if there's going to be a war against the tyrants, Leveticus remains ready to lead the charge to the end of the world. Leveticus and Alice have a game of chess. Lately, she's been more interested in playing, though she doesn't admit it. She prefers to pretend that she's bored, and then wait till Leveticus suggests it, before hemming and hawing and ultimately agreeing to play. She makes a decent move that would work against an amateur, but Leveticus sees through it. He makes another move, and Alice quickly takes his queen. Just as she is about to celebrate, Leveticus moves his bishop and announces checkmate. Leveticus works on a new hollow waif, as Alice rages. He explains that the game is about sacrifice. Alice counters that it's a stupid game just like his waifs, and Leveticus knows that she doesn't like them. This is partially because they're beautiful and scantily clad. He could make his tethers out of almost anything, but he makes them out of pretty girls because people think twice about killing pretty girls. Alice asks why he keeps them around, and he says that she knows why. She says, "Oh, that's right," and makes a distracting motion with her hips. Leveticus tells her that's only one of their purposes, and not even the most important one. He knew that this would piss her off, and he would pay for it later. Alice calls him a dirty old man, and then she asks him how their other use even works. Leveticus is intrigued, as she's never showed that much interest before. He says that death is not a simple process, and points out that she has seen him die many times. She smiles and says 36, and he continues by pointing out that he's still there. This is because his physical form is an illusion. What is real is much less substantial. He says that he is connected to the waifs like a rubber band. When he tries to go to the other place, the band goes taut and pulls him back. As long as one of them still lives and is nearby, he'll be able to come back. He adds that it's all about sacrifice, and makes an analogy between the hollow waifs and him sacrificing his queen in chess. Alice raises her metal arm, and tells it that she thinks he's trying to have a teaching moment with her. He finishes by saying that he sacrificed a useless piece to win. Alice remarks that it's not useless, as the queen is the most powerful piece in the game, and he counters that all pieces are useless, all that matters is the game. Alice is silent, and Leveticus points out that he needs parts from the machinist market, and asks if she wants to go. She says yes, but only if they can go, just the two of them. She tells him she wants to get something for her arm, referring to it as a him, and Leveticus is surprised, asking her if her arm is male. She says yes, at least today. As the two walk through the market of illegal goods, Alice marvels at every little thing, partially to annoy Leveticus. She notices someone following them but doesn't say anything, and continues obsessing over the trinkets, while Leveticus scans for a mechanical part. Alice sees a set of nesting dolls and leans over to look at them, as her tail makes the mistake of reaching into his coat. 6 loud shots ring out, as the man is filled with holes. Leveticus barely reacts, but Alice quickly reloads, as a blade flies at her. They see several men approaching as the crowd flees, and Alice starts firing at them. Leveticus walks in front of her and raises his hand, and one of the men who was closing on them starts crumbling. They hear wet and crunching sounds, and then metallic scratching, as he is turned into a mechanical abomination. The other men look on as the abomination turns to attack them, and Leveticus continues advancing. When the smoke clears, Alice can only see Leveticus standing. He turns to her and yells out in alarm, as she notices that the body she shot dead was moving. A small portion of its upper body detaches, revealing metal claws, and it leaps at her. She blocks with her metal arm and shoots it. As she goes to put a few more rounds in it, Leveticus yells out again and jumps in the way, as several more of the small creatures lunge at her. He blocks their attack, but several of them stab into his body, and Alice realizes that none of the waifs are around to bring him back to life. She fires at the rest of the creatures, and when they're all dead, she stands and waits. She waits too long. Soon the guards would come, and she would have to make more bodies. So she decides to leave, as Leviticus's body gets cold. Alice squeezes a man's hand until she hears several crunches. He and his friend beg her, claiming that they don't have the information she wants. By the sixth hand, she gets what she wants, a location in the quarantine zone. There, she should find rivals of Leviticus's. They must have killed him to rid themselves of competition. She isn't sure it's the right place until she kills a guard outside and out pops one of the knife babies. She goes inside to find a dark room and announces that she's here to kill them all. A voice suddenly comes over a loudspeaker and makes several threats, so she fires a few shots in the dark, and then the voice asks if she's done. She fires a few more times, and the man on the loudspeaker says he will no longer regret killing her. His voice is soon cut off, and then Alice hears him screaming. She's not sure what is happening, but she hopes that it's painful. Soon there is silence, and she tries to find her way out, but realizes that she's locked in. Then she hears more screams, followed by a voice asking if she's still alive, and why she would have wasted so many bullets. A door opens, and Leviticus is standing there with several abominations behind him. Alice is happy to see him, but part of her is angry. Her metal fist slams into his smug face. Leviticus explains that there are secrets he has even from her. Alice hadn't asked for an explanation, but her silence since he returned had caused Leviticus to become uneasy and talk more than usual. He explains that remaining dead seemed to him to be the best way to figure out who was after him. In the end, it came down to, and Alice cuts him off, telling him not to say sacrifice. She explains that she gets it. He sacrificed his most powerful piece, blah blah blah. She then comments that he has such an ego, claiming to be the most powerful piece on the board. Leviticus replies that he was never in any real danger as he had several safeguards in place. Alice has a realization, and then Leviticus finishes, saying that the piece he put up for sacrifice was her. He watches carefully as she draws her pistol and puts it on the table, spinning it around in circles. She asks if she could have died, and he replies that they were playing for keeps. She then slowly takes the gun off the table and tells him to set up the chessboard. As the Governor General's plan to ascend fails, creating the Burning Man, Alice feels a hot flash like she gets when Leviticus turns into the Horseman. She runs outside to find Leviticus in the street, facing a strange-looking man riding a donkey. She draws her pistol, and Leviticus warns her to put it away, telling her that he's very serious. Still having a bad feeling, she keeps her gun trained on him, and asks Leviticus if he's scared of the man's mustache, because he's unable to grow one. The donkey turns and rides away, and Alice asks who he was and where he came from, and then notices that Leviticus is holding something, and asks if he gave him something, or if he took something. Leviticus responds, a little bit of each, and then smiles and tells her to come inside as they have a lot of work to do. As the other outcasts are struggling with the Governor General's death, Leviticus has problems of his own. More and more steampunk abominations are showing up around the city, as a result of lesser necromancers attempting to duplicate his work. As he hunts them down, he notices that his body is decaying faster than it should, even after he dies and comes back in a new body. He assumes this is a curse from the other necromancers, but it seems to be getting worse. He starts going into the crypt underneath the city to try to find some spell or relic that could help him stop the decay. Zoraida had told him that he was the fulcrum of Malifaux's destiny, but if he was dying, did that mean that the burden of destiny had shifted, or that his destiny was far darker than he could have imagined? When the new Governor General announces a ban on mercenary work, Von Schill, leader of the Free Corps, calls a meeting with all the other mercenaries to discuss what they'll do. Alice and Leviticus make their way through the quarantine zone, and are surprised to see a patrol of guild guard. The guards call out for them to stop, and Leviticus notices that they all seem to be equipped with new weapons. Almost immediately, the first guard's head explodes as Alice opens fire, and she ducks for cover as the other guards shoot back. Leviticus's body is filled full of holes, causing him to shake violently, and Alice tells him that this is no time to be dancing. Leviticus looks down at his body as it lays on the floor bleeding. He regrets that this happened, because when he dies, his body has a tendency to suck the life out of things around it. He's also finding that the more times he dies and comes back, the harder it is to return, and the less of him that seems to come with him. He uses several soul stones to heal himself, and then focuses his magic on the guild guards, crushing and deforming their bodies, and turning them into abominations. He sets the abominations on the other guards, and when they're all taken care of, Alice looks at the abominations and says it's so icky. Leviticus is surprised, pointing out that she's never found his abominations icky before. Alice explains that she was referring to the guild uniforms they're wearing. After arriving at the meeting and mingling with the other outcasts, Leviticus sees Parker Barrows and approaches the man. He tells the bandit that he stole a necromantic converter from him last month. Parker says that it doesn't ring a bell, and Leviticus describes it as a rectangular box with crystals and soulstones inside the core mechanism. Parker says that sounds like something he would steal, but he still doesn't remember it, and Leviticus explains that it howls with the eternal torment of the neverborn souls trapped inside. Parker has a sudden realization and tells him he must be talking about the screaming box. Leviticus looks relieved and asks him if he still has it, and Parker says no. After it started speaking to them by name, they shot it full of holes and buried it in the desert. Leveticus is outraged, demanding to know why they would destroy it, and Parker tells him it was a box full of angry ghosts. What else were they supposed to do with it? When the meeting starts, Von Schill tells the group that the rumors were true and that mercenary work will be banned in Malifaux. Vanessa Chambers suggests that they take the city by force, and Von Schill asks her what they'd do with it after that. Alice speaks up and suggests that they hold the city for ransom, as they would be in charge of the Soulstone production. Von Schill then points out that the guild could just stop sending supplies through the breach and completely cut them off. Alice gets a little embarrassed and looks to Leveticus for support, but he merely smiles and stays quiet. Von Schill then explains that he and the Free Corps will be moving to a compound in the Badlands where they can do their business outside the control of the guild. He invites everyone in attendance to join them. After the meeting breaks up, Leveticus approaches Hannah, a high-ranking member of the Free Corps, and tells her that it seems like they've thought this plan through. Hannah tells him that they've had time to think about it, since the Governor General talked to Von Schill about this before everyone knew. He tells her that he has some questions to ask, and inquires as to what kind of laws they'll be enforcing in the new settlement, as surely they can't expect everyone to follow the Free Corps' code. Hannah tells him that they haven't worked out all the details yet, but it will likely be exactly what you'd expect. No murder, stealing, or assaults. Leveticus says that makes sense, and asks if people will be allowed to do what they want otherwise. Hannah looks at him suspiciously, and tells him that maybe he should be more specific, so they can avoid any misunderstandings in the future. Leveticus motions towards Alice, and asks if the Free Corps will have a permissive stance towards May-December relationships. Hannah looks relieved, and tells him that as far as they're concerned, that's their own personal business. Leveticus says that's wonderful, and then asks if their policy on the possession of dead bodies will be as draconian as the guild's. Hannah pauses, and then tells him that this is probably something they'll need to discuss further, but she suspects they can come to some sort of arrangement as long as the bodies don't come from members of their settlement. Leveticus then asks if any areas of scientific inquiry will be considered off limits. Hannah looks at him, trying to figure out what sort of loophole he's trying to exploit, and then tells him that she sees no reason to limit the pursuit of knowledge as long as it does not endanger the rest of the settlement. Leveticus thanks her and tells her that he's reluctant to close up his shop in the city, but that she's given him a lot to think about. When someone confronts Leveticus about the more controversial aspects of his reputation, he usually dismisses it with a smile. When somebody confronts him with evidence, well, people go missing in Malifaux all the time. It only makes sense that someone who is so good at finding things is also very good at hiding bodies. When mercenary work is outlawed in Malifaux City, it doesn't affect Leveticus as much as the other outcasts. However, the guild's increasing stranglehold over the city has led Leveticus to consider opening another branch of captivating salvage and logistics in Freehold, the mercenaries' new city. While Alice oversees the new operation, Leveticus takes advantage of the absence of Dr. McMorning and Victor Ramos and plunders their safe houses, looking for information that might help him with his decaying problem. As Leveticus is having a harder and harder time resurrecting himself, the Burning Man arrives and changes everything. The webbing between life and death is dissolved, and the way to true rebirth is finally open to him again. But then he feels a presence blocking him. Fate, it seems, was issuing him an ultimatum. He could either succumb to death for the last time, or embrace his destiny. Leveticus decides to reach into the void and take hold of the reins made of fire. He is the fifth horseman, destined to save all of Malifaux, according to fate. But Leveticus does not believe in prophecy. He'll play his part, but only for his own sake. So that's it for Leveticus. I know everybody's thinking what I'm thinking. What's up with him and the Horsemen? And when are we going to see this epic battle between him and the Horsemen and whatever the hell else is out there? I really hope we're going to get answers to some of these questions. It's also really interesting that they're hinting there that Zoraida's not going to be involved in whatever this epic clash is going to be, which kind of lines up with the way she's fallen out of favor among the Neverborn, with Lilith being gone. But I guess a lot of that can change. But anyway, back to the important things. Everybody drop a comment below and let me know who you think is the coolest rider. And while you're down there, put in a vote for who you want me to do a video on next. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. And thanks for watching.